Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. If you missed last week's garden tour, it's because it doesn't exist. I did not do a garden tour last week. I was out of town, and I didn't announce that beforehand for obvious reasons. And sometimes I can get myself together enough to have you guys have videos while I'm gone, but that did not happen this time around. So today I am seeing the garden after not being here for a week, and I'm going to be seeing it. I have not gone outside since I've been home, so this is going to be my first time seeing it, same as you guys, except it's been 2 weeks for you guys, so hopefully there will actually be some perceptible change. I know that these garden tours during the winter, they look all really similar, and that's because things are growing a little more slowly. And the reason that I continue to do these garden tours, even though there's not a huge difference, is because, like I've said in the past, I think it's really important for new gardeners especially to see the reality of what the garden is doing and how it actually is changing. I don't want to just show you guys the highlight reel. I want to show you the reality of gardening so that you can be encouraged in your own gardening efforts and not be so caught up like I used to be in looking at all of these perfect gardens that are growing so fast and producing so much, and then not seeing that for yourself and wondering if you're doing something wrong. So I'm here to hopefully help show you this is what a normal garden looks like, even when you're not focusing on the highlight reel. Today is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. And it is getting very, very close to seed starting time. So even if the garden looks a little sad right now, we are in the midst of preparing for the bounty of spring to come again. Those dogs you hear in the background, they live over here in this fence. They're always loud. Alrighty, so we'll start off in the usual spot. This is where my fava beans are, and there is a row of onions in the middle. I would say some of these that looked like they were dying before I left have definitely gone ahead and completely died. But there are these other ones that seem slightly unhappy, but they're still here. They're still growing. I don't really know why some of them died and some of them didn't, but it is what it is. These ones especially, oh man. I think I mentioned last time that I was hopeful that they would send up new shoots after they died, and this one at least seems to be doing it. This one maybe seems to be doing it a little bit. So maybe come spring, some of these more dead and crunchy looking ones will actually come back. This right here was supposed to be a row of lettuces for winter salads, and while there is lettuce here, it has not quite gotten big enough to harvest from this whole time. The spinach has been looking fine. Nothing seems to phase it. However, it's still growing kind of slow. You can see lots of new little growth in here, but not quite big enough to harvest from. I would say I would wait for it to have a whole nother circle of leaves before I would start taking some of the older ones. And maybe I wouldn't even right now because it's growing slowly, and I think it needs all of the photosynthesizing leaves it can get in order to continue to grow at a rate that will help me eventually be able to harvest from it. It's the same story with this little Merlot lettuce and some of these greener lettuces, like this one. I'll show you later the starts that I have. I started some things inside, some lettuces that hopefully will be able to come in and replace these guys as the spring is just coming in and grow a little bit faster than these have. Let's see. Oh, this kohlrabi is like actually bulbing up a tiny bit. That's not so bad. I have tried, I think, 3 times this winter so far to plant kale, and all 3 times it has died in the little baby seedling stage. So this time I have planted it indoors. I've let it get a couple of true leaves, and today, actually, now that I'm back from my trip, is the first day that I'm starting to harden it off before I start thinking about putting it outside. Here are the rows of brassicas, onions, and garlic. Can't really see much until you get down to the Brussels sprouts there at the end. But this cabbage here at the front, this one that has alternated looking sad and looking okay, is currently looking okay. You can tell because the new leaves look happy. Even though this one is crunchy, the new leaves look fine, which means that this plant is currently okay and somewhat recovering from the damage that it sustained. Now, whether or not I actually get a cabbage from it remains to be seen, but it is currently not a dead cabbage. If we take a close look at the garlic, you can see it's looking really quite healthy. Some of the leaves that are bent over are some of the ones that were damaged in the windstorm or maybe cracked under the weight of the snow that we got. But again, if you want to know how a plant is really doing, you look at the new growth, and if that looks normal and healthy, then the plant is probably doing all right. Here's maybe a more extreme example with one of my onions. You can see a lot of the bigger leaves don't look so happy, but if we take a look at these newer leaves, especially that one coming up in the middle, that one looks great. And so I'm not really worried about that onion. I think the leaf damage is primarily due to wind and the weight of snow, and not anything that's necessarily wrong with the plant. Hello, Miss Kada. What's that? Turnips right now look pretty great. I pulled some of the bigger ones for a meal before I left, and now, oh my goodness, I wonder if you guys can see that big root under there. That's a really decent sized turnip right there. This one next to it is starting to bulb up. Some of them are still a little small, but I would say overall the turnips are the most successful thing that I've had in this winter garden. In terms of stuff that I'm harvesting now in the winter, I think probably the garlic and onions are going to be pretty successful, but those aren't harvested until like beginning of summer, so I don't really count them with the winter harvest stuff. But I am planning on having a second round of turnips. You'll see some of those little started plants I have are bunches of turnips, and I'm actually pretty excited about it because I'm trying Charles Dowding's multi-sow method. So there's like 3 or 4 turnips per little cell, and then I'm going to plant them out together with a little bit of extra space in between them and just kind of see how that works. If you haven't seen Charles Dowding, I recommend checking him out. He's very calming to listen to, and he also has really good ideas on no-dig gardening, which is what my garden is. If you didn't know, I am trying to practice no-till. This was originally tilled by my landlord because it was lawn previously, and it was a pretty large area for me to cardboard off. But since this initial tilling, I am not planning on tilling it again. I am planning on only piling stuff on top. And so I'm kind of following Charles Dowding's method with that. One of the big reasons for not tilling would be to not disturb the soil structure, which includes not only the existing root systems left behind by dead plants, but also the relationship that those roots have with fungi in the soil, which I really do plan on talking about in depth in another video. But all of this structure with the roots and the fungi and the bacteria that live in these relationships is really destroyed every time that you till your soil, and it can make it really hard for the soil to hold on to nutrients and stay light and airy. And especially given that I have hard red clay under this, I think that the no-till method is probably a really good method, not just for me, but for anybody trying to garden or grow food. It seems like something that helps with the soil, helps with the entire ecosystem, which is something that I really focus on in my garden, is not trying to operate in a closed system where you kill all the pests and try and protect your plants that way. Oh, Kata is digging. I have not managed to deter her from digging, which is unfortunate, but here we are. Anyways, like I was saying, I will finish this ramble. The no-dig gardening method, I think, is really healthy for the soil, and I think that cultivating the entire ecosystem and not just the plant that you want is going to be more helpful for the plant that you want in the long run. Alright, so back to our regularly scheduled programming. The trellises that I planted peas on a couple weeks ago, the peas have not yet sprouted. That is not yet concerning for me because it takes longer for things to sprout when it's cold outside. The onions on the inside of the trellis honestly look pretty great. This one is up to, how many is that? 5 leaves? I think that you want to wait until, someone correct me if I'm wrong, 13-ish leaves for your onions to be like a good size and ready. And that's like kind of what you're shooting for when you plant early, is to help them have enough layers, aka leaves, because those leaves correspond to a layer of the onion. And so you can tell how big your onion is going to be by how many leaves it has, which is how many layers that onion is going to have. Taking a quick look at the rutabagas. This one's still getting fatter. I'm wondering at what point I should pull it, like if it will stop getting fatter, just because it is kind of tall. This is actually the largest rutabaga I've ever grown. I don't have much experience with them. They don't seem to do well for me, or maybe I'm really bad at them, but I don't really know when the best time to pull them is, so I guess we'll be finding out together. But I'm watching it and looking for when it really slows down in its bulbing, I think. And if it doesn't slow down in its bulbing, but then it gets warm again, I might pull it anyway, because like I've mentioned in the past, these are cold weather plants, and the whole point of their big root is to store energy. And so if it thinks that the time to store energy is over, aka it gets warm, then the root probably isn't going to be as sweet and good. So if we're looking at Brussels sprouts on this final row over here, there seems to be a dichotomy between very healthy looking and dead for some reason. I really have no idea what could have happened to this. I think it looked fine before I left, and now it is just dead. That's weird. And when I talked in my what to plant in your first vegetable garden video about having at least 2 of every plant, this is why sometimes they just die, and there's nothing you could have done better for them, or maybe there is, but you know, it's so hard to keep up with all the things to do for all your plants, and so allowing room for a couple of them to fail is usually a good idea. But look, weirdly enough, this one is dead. Fine, dead. I think this one is a cauliflower, but they're so completely dead, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense that the weather would have killed them, because otherwise these other ones would probably also not look happy. And it's so spotty, it's not like something in the soil, because I mean, this one would be next to the other one that looks bad. If you have any ideas about what could have killed them, I don't see any digging as if a cat peed near them or anything. And the garlic nearby, that looks fine. That's just very, very weird. Now, if you look at this one, you can see some of these lower leaves are yellowing and falling off. And this is actually normal. If a plant's lower leaves are yellowing and falling off and it's just the lower ones, that is really normal for a lot of plants. So I'm not concerned about this particular amount of yellowing. And these holes are just probably slugs or snails. Seems like they've got a little bit of these leaves, but they're not really getting a lot of them. Most of the upper leaves look completely fine. So I wouldn't really be worried about that as a pest. Okay, and so as we wrap up today, I wanted to show you the seedlings I've been talking about. This is probably a little late to be hardening them off, but I was gone for a week, and so there was nothing I could do. These were inside under grow lights. I think this is about 2 weeks old for these. Some of these are turnips. I think one tray of these is rutabagas, and the kale is over here. Some of these are lettuces that are coming in to replace. And they did not get watered properly while I was gone, so they're looking a little sad. And this tells me they might even need a little bit of fertilizer because I was lazy and I used potting soil instead of seed starting mix. So I'll probably give these guys a little bit of fertilizer in their water later today. So the plan is to leave those outside during the day and bring them in at night for a few days, help them get a little used to the cold before I plant them out in the garden. This is kind of the same thing that you do when you start seeds indoors for the summer. You have to get them used to the heat and the extra sunlight, and this is kind of the same thing in the opposite direction. So if I was to plant them outside now, it would be quite a shock to them because they've never gotten any colder than like 73 degrees in my house, and they would probably die. So any of them that didn't die would probably be stunted or take a long time to recover. And it's the same thing with your plants in the summer. If you start them indoors, you have to get them used to the outdoor environment in order for them to survive and thrive. So it'll probably be like another week of doing this inside-outside thing before I actually put them out in the garden. So maybe we can do that together next week on the tour. There's something else here I wanted to show you. It's not really part of the garden, but it sort of is. I got these logs from my partner's dad's lot. They live kind of in the forest, and they had to take down a tree, and they had all these pretty mushrooms on it. And I brought them here to sit them in kind of the woody area next to my garden. And if you haven't seen my how to have more pollinators in your garden video, I definitely recommend checking that out. That will explain why I have these logs, why I bothered acquiring them to just set them down near my garden. But they don't have to have mushrooms on them. I just thought, oh, that looks really cute. If I can have the mushroom logs, please, I would like to have those ones. So that is it from me today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening!